today we are going to have the educational platform Learning with Servindi. And this platform strives to strengthen the capacities of Indigenous peoples, and not just of them, but also to strengthen the knowledge of the environment, the collective knowledge of environment, in this way to demand that the rights of Indigenous peoples be respected and fulfilled. At this time, we are going to have our sister, Jeanette Apari, who has been the one in charge of designing the content of this course. And also we will have with us Jim Tordoya, who is the web designer who has come up with the structure of learning with Servindi, and then the format of the micro modules. And also we will have Guadalupe Patachitayori from the community Puerto Luz of Huaracu, from Madre de Dios. She was one of the first participants of the first course of learning with Servindi that has done the entire course. That's why we have invited her, for her to share her experience on the development of the course. And also we have with us Stefan Thorsel, who is the environmental and climate change advisor with IFGIA, the International Working Group on Indigenous Issues. And he has been with us throughout the project, and he has also been following closely the entire process of the construction of the platform, and also the adaptation of the pedagogical material for the first course that we have launched, and that has been being developed along with a group that finalized the entire course. And also we have with us Alejandro Ire. He's the ex-president of Coahuilema Machirenga, Wajima, that has been one of our associates that has been accompanying us in this project. And he is going to share the experience of the project of Coahuilema in the implementation of computers and satellite internet in the Coahuilema base in the highlands of Madre de Dios. So having all these panelists, we now start this event, when we'll start with Jeanette Apari. She is a communicator of Servindi, and she is the one responsible for the methodological development of learning with Servindi. And we all have to mention that she studied at the University of San Marcos, and she has specialized in educational psychology. So she now is going to share with us the construction of the platform, and she's going to explain to us how we went from a face-to-face classroom to virtual platforms, and also the methodological development of this experience of learning with Servindi. So now I give the floor to Jeanette. You have the floor. Well, thank you very much, Roger, for this introduction, and good morning to everyone that is present. I thank you for inviting me to participate in this public presentation. And so very quickly, I would like to explain the second slide that shows the contents of this, my small participation that I am now starting.
Bien, ajá. Exacto. Mi participación contiene.
So my participation contains these 4 points. I'm going to talk a little bit about the introduction. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the virtual training, and also some of the types of the Peruvian education phase of the emergency. But the main point is the systematization of the process of design, implementation, evaluation of the platform, learning with Servindi, and the course which have called the challenge of Indigenous peoples and climate change. The next one.
Les decía que, bueno,
And so I was telling you that I'm going to share with you something about this process that we've gone through so quickly throughout this pandemic, and it's all about the virtual process. The virtuality is now taking a predominant place in our society. It's consuming a great amount of our resources, is leading human beings to a process of social globalization beyond what was ever foreseen. It's already embedded in our daily life, in our work, in all aspects of our life. The next one, please. And the training process are reaching a new scale with virtual education. And on one hand, it's creating better opportunities for access to knowledge, but on the other hand, it's widening the opportunity gaps. Ideally, with technology, there should be no borders or limits to develop training processes and thus expand opportunities beyond the borders. However, among the countries, there are still a significant digital divide between different countries. According to official data, about half of the world's population uses the internet and the other half does not. The next one, please. Many of those that are not connected live in least developed countries, developing countries, and although the number of internet users has increased by more than 1 billion people, they're still persistent, important, and least connected countries and communities, especially indigenous communities and those least communities connected. There's still significant difference in digital access between these different ones. So I am now going to talk about the training, about the virtual training. With the rise of internet and the development of technology, it has been possible to overcome the problems of traditional distance education, which it was difficult to carry out collaborative learning tasks. And with the growth of communications, the need to develop new skills and new competencies. Here, for example, we develop these face-to-face workshops. We were always centered on knowledge or on skills, but now with these new changes, we are now looking for other types of training, and we have looked to see what kind of training do our participants need. So we need, like, for planning, time organizations, digital skills, how to use these different devices, reflection, the different criteria, among other skills that are needed. And in response, these new training alternatives are born from the virtual, such as e-learning, learning online, or m-learning, learning through our mobile phones, and the MOOCs, which are the courses that are now online, distance learning. So now we have all the different learning of communications.
Bueno, aquí he puesto una cita, ¿no?
And here I've done a quotation that this is called the learning online. The next one, please.
En conclusión, ¿no? La formación virtual.
In conclusion, virtual training with its different modalities arises as a response to the needs of a changing world with a high degree of connectivity and continuous learning needs. The students have new ways of learning, new ways of communicating. And the development of virtual platforms has been well supported or widely supported by learning platforms, which are oriented to facilitate the user experience as the platform, which we are talking about learning with Servindi, which is supported by individual learning, but it has a view to build more tools that will stimulate greater interaction and especially collaborative learning. And later on, I will explain to you more about the process of the design of the implementation of this virtual platform. The next one, please. And I also want to share with you some of the points, some of the things that we have lived through during this time of this educational emergency in our country in Peru, in order for those of you to understand the context that what's going on that are from other countries, this process that we've gone through with educational emergency here in Peru. The first one was through the decree 44/2020 PCM. The government declared a state of national emergency and ordered mandatory social isolation or quarantine for COVID-19. Subsequently, the Minister of Education suspended the provision of on-site educational services in public and private basic education institutions, while the state of national emergency and the sanitary emergency for the prevention of and control of COVID-19 are in force. In this context of health emergency, the MINDU, or the the Ministry of Education, has just issued norms regulating the provision of education service by educational institutions through the strategy I Learn at Home. And one of these actions was this strategy called I Learn at Home, which was implemented throughout the country. Almost 6 million students in public basic education institutions are remaining at home, and more than 82,130 public educational institutions suspended classroom teaching. Of this number, approximately 1,200,000 Indigenous students have stopped attending almost 27,000 educational institutions where bilingual intercultural education services are provided at the three levels of education in first and middle school and third and high schools. MINDU addresses educational service provided by public and private schools during the national health emergency in a differentiated manner. And many are taking their own action. They're using other platforms, other educational platforms, adapted according to their needs and their context. The next slide, please. Last year, the Ministry of Education reported worrying figures. 230,000 primary and secondary students dropped out of the education system, and 200,000 secondary schools are enrolled and not accessing this service. These figures reflect the enormous digital gap that exists in Indigenous communities and rural towns due to the lack of mainly public service, such as electricity or internet, technological tools, or the lack of teacher training. In view of this, the Education Ministry of Peru is offering greater connectivity and is offering, for example, the delivery of tablets to the whole country and reinforcement program for 5th grade students and remedial classes. All this information I've gotten from the Defense of the People. So once we put this in a context and we give you a general platform from going from the face-to-face classroom to virtual platforms, now I'm going to explain to you the most important point is to understand this process of the systematization of the design implementation of the Learning with Servindi platform. The next slide, please. So our process of design for implementation of this platform, Learning with Servindi, I've divided it into 6 point and 5 stages. First, to know the background, then the construction of its contents, then later how we've gathered the information, then the virtualization process of all this content, and then finally the management of the virtual course, the challenge of Indigenous peoples and climate change. And then at the end, I'm also going to give some recommendations. So let's first start with the background information. So before the pandemic, we were having face-to-face training in different regions of the country, like Madre de Dios, Siquayali, San Martin, among other regions. Each one of our face-to-face workshops, we were applying a certain different methodology, and it was active, participative, demonstrative, and explanatory, so that the facilitator, we, the part of the Servindi team that was led by Jorge, who is the director of Servindi, we came up with these ideas of a matrix, a planning in order to develop these face-to-face workshops based on certain criteria um, that include strategy. Our first um, goal was for them to assimilate and to be able to show that they really have learned the information that we've shared and the knowledge that we've shared, that they're interested in things on environment, negotiation, on the topic of the threats of indigenous peoples, etc. So we've applied different learning strategies like role playing, dramatization. We used a lot of role playing, like in the process of negotiations and in a province of Madre Dios, and it gave us great results because each one, especially the adults and our brothers and sisters, indigenous brothers and sisters, were able to capture the essence of the message and the theory. Even though it was difficult, it was our brothers and sisters were able to understand it. And the majority of the cases, they are not academicians. They have not finished going on to study at higher learning. So then that was our goal. It was in order to transmit and to share our objectives so that they could understand the message we were sharing. We also used collaborative learning. We developed these different sessions. Each one of the groups had the ability to develop, elaborate their tasks, the homework, and we worked a lot with the collaborative learning among themselves, among the students. So our brothers and sisters, the ones that had greater amount of learning, then they could share that with others. And then others would each construct it and go constructing over the learning that existed in the group. And then we had dynamics like integration, icebreakers, knowledge, how to deal with conflicts, conflict breakers. And so this marvelously, we were able to apply throughout the development, our face-to-face workshops. We were able to use all these didactic measures, and we applied different ways of assessing knowledge and skills, and also to determine what their abilities and also their attitudes. And we also had very good excellent results. This was really had a lot of success because we weren't rigid. How rather we were using what the participants wanted, and so we were able to evaluate by group and in an individual way how they were progressing. And we've also used models and types of learning from popular education, meaningful learning. We also applied theories of constructive learning. So all this was possible because of the face-to-face workshops and the background of the workshops that we did that were face-to-face. So then we were developing these courses until finally the pandemic came about. So then we had to continue with the development of our workshops but then we had this challenge. How can we use all this information and start a virtual platform? Then we started to work as a team, but first we had to have develop the contents. We had to develop a bunch of information, and we had to figure out how to work this. So we did what we have here. Can you see this here?
We're going to be
We had
working
12
on
modules
12
of
training
training.
modules.
nuestros hermanos y hermanas de los pueblos indígenas, ¿no?
On topics that are of interest to our
Servindi,
brothers and
servicios
sisters
ecosistémicos de los
on
bosques,
ecosystem services
red y RIA,
of the
la
forest,
gobernanza territorial indígena, red y RIA 2, ¿no? Fondos climáticos, contribuciones nacionalmente
Red
determinadas,
RIA and RIA 2,
contrato y negociación, gobernanza
contracts,
territorial indígena,
negotiation,
parte 2, salvaguardias
indigenous
red,
governance,
fondos climáticos 2. Entonces,
climate
Module 1, climate
funding.
change, territory and forest. I'm sorry, I'm
That
not
was a
sure why
result after
I
a
don't hear the
work
other interpreter.
that we carried out together,
y también en un
and we
contexto
developed
que
12
se
modules
estaba aprobando el reglamento de la
in a
ley marco
context
de cambio climático en el país, ¿no?
that was approved
Con
within the country
la participación del
with
Ministerio
the
del
participation
Ambiente
of the
y del
Ministry of the
Medio
Environment
Ambiente.
and
Creemos
Indigenous
también
peoples.
que estos módulos van
We
a
found
contribuir mucho
that would be
en ser
best for these modules to,
ahora.
they'll be the best
Estos
in terms of
módulos,
helping our
ahí ustedes
indigenous brothers and
tienen cierto
sisters.
grado de complejidad, ¿no?
As you can see them here, they go from least complex to most complex, and we divided them up by levels. As you can see, from modules 1 through 4, from climate change to red and RIA, that's level 1. From module 5 to 9 would be level 2, and module 10 to 12, level 3. So one is, these are modules that we need to work through it because many brothers and sisters are not scholars, and we needed to find a way to introduce them into these subjects in terms of the environment, that is. Next slide.
Después de tener ya, digamos, la idea de cómo poder trabajar y desarrollar
After we had the idea of how to go about creating these modules, we started researching how we were going to structure all of this within a virtual platform. We talked to different consultants, and ultimately we decided to work with what is called a micro-modular structure, which is one that has several subtopics. This structure has 3 levels, 12 modules, and within those 12 modules, there are 35 micro-modules. There are many of them. Nevertheless, this is pretty strategic because each one of the micro-modules is an introduction to the next one. And we were sure that this would be the best way for our brothers and sisters to learn within this virtual platform. Aprendo with Servindi platform, that is. So level 1 has 18 micromodules, level 2, 10, and level 3, 7. In terms of the development of the structure of content, in each one of the micromodules, the following pedagogical moments were taken into account. These are key points in learning. First, from experience, which is bringing together the prior knowledge of the participants. That is, knowledge and experiences that they bring from their own lives, learnings, through different activities that are carried out both individually and in groups, which later they share for a larger audience. We have also taken this into account for the structure of each one of the micromodules. The next moment would be building new learning. And now that's a transmission of new information for the future development of new knowledge. The third point is practicing new learning. That is putting into practice the information received and the new knowledge attained through diverse activities or various activities. The last one is checking what was learned. It's when we create a summary and we do evaluations of the learning achieved. We make sure there that our brothers and sisters have learned the different subject and the different modules. Therefore, based on the previously shown information, in the last slide, we selected this micromodular structure, which is simple, because that's what we wanted. We wanted it to be as simple as possible so that the learning flows. Also, as I mentioned, there are sisters who are new to this learning. A few of them are scholars, or some of them are, and they can learn faster. But the structure of each one of these micro module is very simple, of easy access and easy understanding above most. So it's a video, and then we establish the objectives of the learning. Then we address prior knowledge, which is a brief exploration through some questions to find out what they know. And many brothers and sisters know a lot of this material, but they may use different names for a lot of the terminology of the information presented. So we want to make sure that they know what it's about. Then we talk about the name of the micromodule. So we're able to, so that we're able to show this information, we choose a format of didactical material. We call this well, it's an infographic, mostly with infographics, though, I would say, because we believe that is very didactical, very good for learning to summarize information or present it in a very summarized fashion. Now, if the participant wants to learn further about it, then we have the saber más, so learn more, where you find bibliography, references, academic write-ups, so that they may continue learning and attaining more knowledge. Finally, the micro module contains a brief evaluation of different formats. At the beginning, the earlier ones has something very dynamic, very interactive, that they have to match a concept to an image. So we want to make it as user-friendly so that they feel more comfortable, so they don't feel afraid of working with this material. But as it goes, it becomes different in nature when they have a single choice. Always keeping in mind that we want the participants to learn the most possible. And if they didn't learn it before, that they learn something, or that they make it theirs at the time of the evaluation. Point 3, about gathering information. We carried out consultations with specialists. We have mapped all the information. We search sources and reliable documents from different organizations, such as IFGIA, which has created many learning material and works, which we have also used to carry out this platform, as well as other ally organizations, IP, national ones, international ones, NGOs. They have been working on these topics throughout the years. And we found very interesting to bring all this together and bring it together for the creation of this platform. There was also a filtering and contrasting of the information for the micromodules, as well as a compilation of audiovisual resources and a summary of the contents for the infographics. It was a lot of work because we had to gather the essence of a subject so that we can carry this platform. Next slide, please. In terms of making this platform virtual, as mentioned before, as Roger said specifically, together with an expert on this topic, who's going to be presenting here today, we worked on introducing all this material onto the platform, which has allowed us also to create the corresponding graphs that were going to be contained therein. And they were also going to be part of the first virtual class on IPs and climate change. So there's an adaptation of banners and modules and micromodules, introduction of audios that come with the text presented in micromodules, as well as the micromodule for each one of the, in terms of its bibliography. So we have been working on the virtual classroom management. Roger has been key in this regard because a lot of work had to be done. They had to do the request of participation. We're been answering many questions from the participants. So a lot of work has been going on with monitoring of the learning of the participants also. Finally, in terms of recommendations, we started with this first course, but we're sure that we'll be able to continue implementing new methodologies, new courses, continue strengthening each one of the methodologies of the material and resources, and each one of the thematic axis of the platform learning with Servindi. It has a different area, communications, learning, just different ones. And I hope that I include all information necessary. And thank you very much for your attention. That'll be all for me today. Thank you very much, Jeanette. We're gonna project a video and then we'll continue with today's event.
Plataforma de formación virtual para pueblos indígenas. Aprendo con Servindi. Una herramienta digital innovadora para fortalecer a los pueblos indígenas mediante capacitaciones a distancia. Aprendo con Servindi tiene 3 grandes ejes temáticos: ambiental y cambio climático, línea verde de capacitación, ciudadanía y política, línea azul, y el eje comunicación y periodismo, línea morada. El primer curso virtual denominado Los pueblos indígenas y el desafío del cambio climático corresponde a la línea verde y comprende 12 módulos, agrupados en 3 niveles. Para acceder al primer curso, ingresa a www.aprendoconservindi.edu.pe. Haz clic en el botón Acceder, que se encuentra en la parte superior derecha de tu pantalla. Ingresa tu usuario y contraseña. Haz clic en el botón Acceder. Haz clic en el icono igual, que aparece en la parte superior izquierda de tu pantalla. Elige Mis cursos y luego en Los pueblos indígenas y el desafío del cambio climático. Selecciona Nivel del curso. Para comenzar con la capacitación virtual, elige nivel 1 o el nivel en que te encuentres. Cada nivel contiene módulos que están divididos en unidades. A su vez, cada unidad agrupa a micromódulos, donde se encuentran los materiales pedagógicos y la evaluación. Dentro de los micromódulos hallarás infografías, videos y otros recursos interactivos, así como lecturas recomendadas relacionadas a la unidad. Al terminar de revisar los materiales de cada micromódulo, podrás resolver la evaluación, la cual será importante para continuar con los siguientes módulos y niveles. Repite esta acción en cada uno de los módulos y micromódulos.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for sharing the video. I would like to highlight now what Jeanette mentioned, which is that the course is not simply what Servindi thought that it was best to create. We have been working for years on this in-person learning, and we decided then to create modules for person-to-person learning. But now with the pandemic, we have had to adapt all of our material. For this entire year, we have been using the information which we already had, but then finding where to present it now. Some of the courses had already been validated by the communities, in the communities. And one of the positive aspects of this project that we have created together with our allies is that we always try for our workshops to take place in the communities. Why? Because we used to go there and be able to participate with a lot more people in entire communities. So it's not the same as bringing them to the city, which would happen with only a few people. So we changed that. We went to the territories, we validated many of the courses, many of the topics addressed in the courses, and we adapted them to this new methodology now. To talk about how to navigate through this platform in greater detail, Jim Tordoya will be the next speaker. He's an expert on the implementation of digital platforms. He's currently working in TV Peru, a national television platform in our country, and he will be explaining how learning with Servindi works. Thank you very much, Roger, for the introduction. I'm going to be sharing my screen. I hope you can see it. Good morning, everyone. This is a virtual platform, Aprendo with Servindi, or Learning with Servindi. As you can saw in the video, it has 3 thematic areas. And currently, we have this course on IPs and climate change. The first time you sign in, you see this presentation, or that you go onto this page. And what we've tried to do here is to have all the methodology, everything created by Servindi, to bring it onto a virtual platform that is of easy access. And users will go here and access it, for example, on this course. And what you see here, it's all the different modules. So the main course with all the different levels and modules that have been created for that one course. They can go directly into any one of the modules, say, for example, in level 1, and then I'll go to the main area of the course. I can also navigate through the different levels, which is explained on a video here in an easy format. In this module, for example, you see its corresponding video here. This is divided by modules, clearly identified so there are no confusions. So are the units as well as all the material that corresponds to each one of the modules. As Jeanette mentioned, every micro module has its own evaluation. So it includes prior knowledge, and if you need to reinforce the knowledge, well, you have saber más, learn more, that is. And then you can navigate through the entire content of each one of the modules, and that's for all the course. So once I go into a given module and I finish it, or however far I have advanced, you'll be able to see. Say, for example, that I am in level 1 right now. Since I'm not working, it doesn't select it, but each student is going to see how far they have gone within each one of the modules. Say module 1, it says where they are, and on the left hand side you can see which part is it specifically that would match that what goes in terms of the learning. So as I mentioned, this is very simple, no complex methodology has been applied. The idea is to make this dynamic, simple to navigate through. And I can also move ahead to some other area in a more general sense. That there should be no technical limitations. It does not require advanced knowledge of technology in order for anyone to participate in this course. And that would be, in general, how this is set up. What has been created. I've worked with Servindi to make sure that the technology carries out what it's needed. The idea is for the platform matches what Servindi is trying to do in terms of its learning and teaching. And that's all from on my end. Any comments? Thank you very much, Jim. I'm sure there will be questions about this at the end of the presentation. We already had the announcement for the first course in February. Many people signed up. Actually, no, February, that's when we had, when the first course started, and we had all the users ready with their passwords, and there was follow-up on this. And one of the students that finished this program is Guadalupe Patiachi Cayorek, who is from a community from Madre de Dios. They are part of the Arautin Machirautim Council. She finished the course. So now I'm going to give her the word or the floor so she can share how this course may be useful to others, as it was of use to her. She just finished her career in political science on the Amazon University of Madre de Dios. You have the floor, Guadalupe.
First of all, I would like to give a warm greeting to everyone and everyone that's here with us. And for me, it is a great pleasure to give my perspective about the platform Aprendo con Servindi that was launched in 2020, and to strengthen the climate change action in favor of Indigenous peoples. It was an event that all of us participated throughout the territories, Indigenous men and women, and this platform is of great importance, and it's at a high level. We need to state that the presentations that were that focused on strengthening our territories and protecting our territories for climate change show the interest and the improvement of our governance of ecosystems and the conservation of forests And these are systems that help us to strengthen our modalities and to adapt to the consequences and changes, the impacts that we see from climate change through this knowledge that we have, this ancestral knowledge, and we have to take into account that the Indigenous woman has a great amount of knowledge, a rich amount of knowledge for adaptation to climate change. Our Indigenous sisters should also have the opportunity to participate in the decision making as any citizen because of our vision, our our worldview. And I also want to highlight the great work that those who developed this virtual platform, what they chose in order to offer a great didactical method for this pandemic came about, and this virtual classrooms really came about at the right time in order to help us to increase our skills and our capacities in communities. I'm from the Nativa community of Puerto Luz that has been affected by the pandemic. In fact, with the defense of our territories, I can say by experience that the youth of my community have shown very little interest in these topics, and they are very few. Jorge Tayori, Andres Moki, they have left us a great legacy of conservation. Teodoro Tenek, they have struggled and they continue to struggle in order to conserve the conservation, preservation of our territories. And I want to express my gratitude for everyone that has been working with this, working on these different workshops, and this has been of great benefit and help to me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Guadalupe. The truth is, it really is exciting for us to hear what you went through and how you enjoyed the platform. And what I wanted to highlight about Guadalupe is that when we made the call for the course and she signed up, and then the next step was to offer a introduction workshop for those that had signed up. So we offered workshop how to navigate the platform, and we did 3 workshops, and she was not able to connect due to problems that she had with her geographic location, although she has internet in her community in Madre de Dios. And at this time of the year, it rains a lot. The rain comes and there's no internet. And for that reason, she was not able to connect to those introduction workshops. But what really surprised us is that even though she wasn't able to connect, she sent us an email and she said that she was very interested and she would please not leave her out. So we considered that, and we are very happy that she was able to join us and here with her intervention. It shows, she was showing us the wisdom of knowledge holders in her community, how important they are. So thank you very much, Guadalupe. We hope that you will stay with us. Maybe some of our friends might have some questions for you. So then we're going to go on with Stefan Thorsel. He is the advisor for the climate advisor and program coordinator for IFGIA, and he brings technical and programmatic experience from international NGOs. And he also worked for the international NGO for Ireland. He has a lot of experience, and he also worked with the Danish Red Cross. He holds a degree in international relations, and he has a master's degree in international humanitarian action. Stefan is the person of IFGIA that has been with us throughout this entire process, and he has helped us with the construction of the platform and also the work as a consortium that we have developed within the community. He's been along with us. So now you have the floor so that he can explain to us a little bit more about the international topics on climate change and how all this experience with Servindi could be duplicated in other countries. So Stephen, you now have the floor.
So as Roger mentioned, I'm a climate advisor with the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs, also known as IDIA. We're an international NGO supporting Indigenous peoples in defense of their rights, and we have done so for more than 50 years. We are very happy to have collaborated with Servindi in developing the online training platform Aprendo con Servindi, or Learning with Servindi. We find this an extremely timely and relevant initiative. And we also wish to recognize the support of NICFI, which is Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. And we're also happy that other donors are showing an interest in taking this platform to the next level. Today, I'm going to reflect on the importance of Indigenous peoples' advocacy and defense of their rights in climate action. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis are two very real and current global crises. We hope within a year or two to have overcome the pandemic. However, the climate crisis has a longer perspective. Science warns us that humanity has less than 10 years left to reduce global emissions by half in order for nature and the climate to escape an irreversible tipping point of no return. Obviously, Indigenous voices all over the world, from the Arctic in the north to the Amazon, have warned us of the dangers and of the severity of the climate and biodiversity crisis much before Western science raised its concern, but no one listened. Recently, the scientific community has acknowledged that the knowledge of Indigenous peoples is key in the search for climate solutions. Constituting just 6% of the global population, Indigenous peoples protect and defend nearly a quarter of the planet's land surface. They protect the Amazon forest, African savannas, Arctic tundra, and other precarious ecosystems containing vital biodiversity. Despite this, politicians and other power holders continue to ignore the messages of Indigenous defenders of nature. They are blind due to their obsession with power, consumerism, and economic recovery. As a result of ignorance, many top-down climate initiatives fail to apply a human rights-based approach, and consequently, they do not ensure the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous communities affected at the local level. The reality is that so-called safeguards are often treated in a manner of a simple box-ticking exercise rather than being applied as genuine and effective guarantees to ensure that climate initiatives do not violate rights at the local level. For example, at the Green Climate Fund, there is a constant pressure to achieve quantitative spending targets. This often comes at cost of real and effective safeguards. IVGIA publishes each year a publication called The Indigenous World. It's an annual report on the status of Indigenous people's rights around the world. And last year's edition had a focus on climate change and included many examples on how Indigenous people's rights are threatened and violated by top-down climate action. In this current reality, it is more than ever important that the voices of Indigenous peoples sound loud and clear in places where decisions about the future of the planet are taken, both at local, national, and international level. In recent years, the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change has been operationalized. It is paramount to ensure that this platform genuinely ends up strengthening Indigenous voices, because there's also the risk of it becoming a parking space for Indigenous issues distant from key negotiations, such as the ones on market mechanisms under Article 6. At national level in Peru, an Indigenous peoples climate change platform has been established, inspired by the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform under the UNFCCC. Also, in other countries, similar processes are taking place, at local and national level. These platforms offer great opportunity for Indigenous peoples to be heard and for them to present their recommendations. But to ensure that there is a broad and balanced representation, it is important that Indigenous women and youth, as well as men, and from a broad range of communities, including those most at risk, are involved in the advocacy at local, national, international level. In Peru, Servindi, ONAMIAP, Coarima, and other IPIA partners have for the past several years organized training on climate advocacy and rights defense at community level. Linked to this, we have facilitated the participation of Indigenous representatives in meetings and negotiations at national and international level to ensure that grassroots voices are represented. But today, with the pandemic and with the moral imperative to reduce our carbon footprint from travel, we have to find alternative and innovative solutions to continue the important advocacy work. Therefore, as I believe my colleague Alejandro Irey from Coarima will explain in a moment, we have facilitated the installation of solar-powered satellite internet in remote communities of the Amazonian Madre de Dios region of Peru. And now connected, we have begun organizing virtual training workshops. With the learning with Servindi virtual training tool, we have now taken the next step. It is an educational semi-self-instructive learning tool which offer an opportunity to increase our reach to new communities all over Latin America at nominal cost. This training is empowering its participants with tools to engage in effective climate advocacy and defense of their rights and of nature. It is our wish that learning with Servindi becomes an international model for inspiration and replication for Indigenous peoples from other regions of the world. IPIA is ready to promote this with our global network. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations on Aprendo con Servindi and to Guadalupe for having completed the course. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Stefan. Ha detallado muy bien los
Thank you,
procesos
Stefan.
¿no? Y estas trabas que hay, pues, además por parte de las empresas.
You help us to understand how this has gone on and what has been happening, and sometimes, excuse me, the obstacles that the state sets doesn't allow us to progress. And many of you know about this process because in Peru with Coarima and working with Indigenous peoples, they have been participating in the regulation of the framework on climate change. And this has been a very important product of advocacy, because otherwise we would not have been able to have this law, nor would we have had this minimum standards for protecting Indigenous peoples. So continue. We're going to present Alejandro Irey Coricepa. He is the coordinator of the Machilinga people, and he studied the cultural relations and ecotourism at the University in the Amazon of Madre de Dios. And Coarima is one of the Indigenous organizations. It is the organization, the intermediate in between the other confluences of the other communities in Madre de Dios. And they have done a huge revolution of a digital revolution. They have given the communities computers and internet, and he's going to tell us about what work has been developed now. Alejandro, you now have the floor. Good morning. Hello in Peru.
Everyone around the world who are listening to us. I am the president of our council in Coahuila. We have 17 communities under us. Our language brings us together in the Rio, in the river Starengue and the Madre de Dios region. Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate and being able to give visibility to what our indigenous organizations are doing in grassroots fashion, as well as with assistance. And I'd like to thank NGOs who are supporting IPs in our work. Next slide. This one is our plan of action as Coarim. This explains how this process came about, of some of the most important tools that have been implemented in these Native communities. I mentioned, or I call them Native, because this are difficult to reach out to. It's risky to get to them. At times it takes weeks to get to them. Therefore, briefly, Coahuila is part of this structure under COICA, IDESEP, FENEMAT. Then comes Coahuila and the Native communities under us, the 17 Native communities, which are indigenous organizations that follow the same line of work, the same fight for our rights as indigenous peoples through our cosmovision. This indigenous organization is composed of 3 components. I mentioned this because there's one component, one project, which with IFGIA and the NORAD, which is a project that has not affected, but has helped us to reach out to Native communities and bring to them many courses, many activities with great support on subjects such as territorial governance, indigenous economies, tourism, under the Coahuila organization. This is a project that is called Promotion and Recognition of the Protection of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Red Plus, Peru, and Myanmar. This has opened the doors to support the FENAMAP by the CEP, to support COICA on many areas, on issues related to the rights of indigenous peoples. So we have created Consorcio Peru. Servindi is its general coordinator. Coahuila and ONAMIAP are also participating in this said program. Within this, there was a program to address communications, which is a key aspect. And we know that in any institution, every 2 or 3 years, different leaders carry out their work. On this case, this is a 5-year project from 2016 to 2020. And currently, we just started a new year, or a new mandate in 2019, last year. I mean, through last year. And we have been carrying out some trainings on information sharing, the native communities, Puerto Maldonado, and broadcasting this, that is, so that the voices of indigenous broadcasters are heard in the different spaces, such as COICA, IDESEP, including Servindi, and on their spaces within the framework of the Indigenous Peoples Movement. Now, I will be explaining more about the FM radio, which is a process that we have been pushing forth with great challenge. Next, I will be talking about satellite-based internet. And last, an online app through Korima Radio. I'd like to highlight step by step what we have been carrying out nowadays in some of our communities. One activity is training to indigenous broadcasters. This hasn't just happened with our current work, but this started back in 2016 with the then president, Luis Tayori, and then it continued with Reinaldo Segundo, and currently we have been training youth from different native communities, but there has been little participation, little interest from the communities because they didn't really understand the project very well. They didn't really know how important communication was then as opposed to now. The other project is some co-managing youth. So broadcasters are from the native communities, not just students from the communities. So we have been working directly with the communities so that they can be trained in terms of how to speak, how to pay attention to the questions, how to do write-ups, and all these key aspects that we've been working on for the last 2 or 3 years, and we've been training them on. Since then, we used to work with external radios. I would call them exterior or like Radio Quilamba, Huaypeto, Impacto, and Madre de Dios. And I call them exterior, if you will, because they were hired from the outside, and the youth will record and they will transmit or broadcast from there the different key roles or key participation of each one of the organizations that were working on behalf or in favor of indigenous peoples. Now, in terms of the radio, I would like to mention that it has been key to our project because we have had in mind to create an FM radio here in Madre de Dios, Puerto Maldonado, with the intention of having the communities listen, be up to date to what we are carrying out, what we're doing, what IP organizations are doing at a national and international levels. So these radios have been part of training first through Servindi. There was an engineer who explained to us, an expert, how the process works. For Kojima, all this was very expensive. Why? The cost related to antenna services. To have an antenna here in Puerto Maldonado, in the main office, in the main link in Puerto Maldonado, it was difficult. We didn't have the land for it. We needed to hire someone to watch over it. We needed funding to build fencing for it. Several things were required for this FM radio to be there. There was a lot of research so that we can do this work formally. We had to carry out some special paperwork with environment, with the Department of the Environment. We also had to install repeating antennas. And then again, that was all part of this project, which made it difficult, which is why we created a strategy that helped us very much based on the experience of one community, which is Puerto Azul, because they had satellite internet to begin with. So Kojima noticed that that experience had worked well and replicated that in other communities, native communities. Something that was very necessary in many of these native communities. The internet there helped to set up early alerts for the teachers, for the students, for bilingual students, was very useful. And for emergencies, because as I mentioned, many of these communities were very far away and they didn't have the conditions or medical conditions that were positive. They didn't have good medication that hadn't expired. For example, sometimes it would take them 5-6 hours to come to Cusco from some other areas, 7-8 hours to reach other larger cities, which is why we decided to install internet there, because of all these needs that I just mentioned. We have been working with this proposal, which Servindi has analyzed as the main coordinator of the consortium. After its approval, We have created this in 13 different stages. Not just it was a matter of installing internet and then forgetting about the native communities. We needed to analyze how they may continue being prevalent and have enough resources to moving forward without depending on any one organization, and thinking, how is this going to be working down the line, 15 years down the line, not just a year or two. So internet is there now in 10 different native communities. Some don't have it because they already had it. Different speed ones. And in those cases, the internet speed was improved. So after satellite dishes were established, then we moved on to the implementation phase, which included setting up computers, desks. What good is to have internet if people don't have a computer? How about printers? That is about to, there's bad connection, there's no sound. The call froze. There's still no sound. Interpreter cannot hear.
Me parece que hubo un pequeño... hay problemas con el internet de...
It seems that Alejandro has internet issues. Alejandro, we hear you. Go ahead. So as I mentioned, I don't know if you're able to share my screen again. Yeah, your presentation is on. The satellite internet process in the communities was set up before the pandemic. Thank God it was done before, because now the need is much greater to have this sort of internet, because the youth, the students got stuck in the different communities, and many indigenous students who used to go to Cusco, Madre de Dios, had to return to their communities due to the pandemic. So fortunately, they had this internet so they can continue taking online classes from their communities as they're doing it now. Next slide, even though I cannot see it. I can't see it.
Yes, well, in Colima, we have 17 indigenous communities, which there's some, on the screen you can see some of the communities where the satellite has been installed. And so I want to highlight where internet has been installed. Santa Rosa de Huacaria, Quero, Cintuya. We have an office of a liaison office in an indigenous community, which is Shintuya. We have also installed it there, and that liaison office is very important that it function now, because that's where some of the leaders of Coedima are there, and they are supporting if there's any kind of infraction of on the rights or violating of the rights of Indigenous peoples there. So that's really been helping a lot as liaisons. And Shipitiari is also a community that is using it. Isla de los Valles, Puerto Azul, Macenagua, San Jose de Carene, y Barranco Chico. The next slide, please. These communities, there are some photos there for you to see. In the first one is Shintuya. It's the communal hall, and the next one is in Santa Rosa de Huacaria. And the one that's the biggest one is in Puerto Azul. That's in my community, in Machiguenga. There, it includes 3 indigenous communities, or 3 indigenous peoples in that community, and there are other communities that were involved, but I don't remember the ones that well. But anyway, with the support of FENAMAC is an organization. It's a regional organization of Madre de Dios. Our president is there, Mr. Palacios, next to Jonathan Yuri, who's also a leader, who is now in the liaison office in Shituya. The next one. And then we have here the implementation that I was explaining. This consisted in following the regulations with the proper protocol, exchanging these things in open spaces and the outdoors. And there we were able to deliver laptops. And you can see in the communities, the students, the children it's so hot in the communities, but these indigenous youth and children, they're able to use these devices. And here you can see on the right, we're delivering a laptop into Isla de los Valles. And so we've given a portable laptop to them. And then we also have desktop computers, because some communities prefer to have the desktop computer, and other communities prefer the laptops. And why is that? Well, like in Shintuya, Barranco Chico, or other communities, they have electricity, right? Having electricity that comes from Cusco, and they can then use certain devices. But in other indigenous communities, they don't have light or electricity 24 hours a day because they use solar panels. So that's one of the one thing I forgot to talk about was the solar panels. And this also is helpful to mitigate climate change so that it doesn't affect our ecosystems. Thank you. The next slide. And the next one, please. So here you can see the training. The training, as I was explaining, we started the initiation of training. In the photograph, you can see there that this person is receiving this training. This is with Servindi. Then we have here, we teach about information technology, communication, journalistic production, drafting documents, because it's always very important to have the communities organized so that the leaders can be organized, so that they can draft official documents and they can send letters and memorandum and different kinds of documents to the communities. And it's also been capacity building, indigenous rights, climate change, the different issues that we have been working on. We're doing capacity building. And here there's some photos. The first photo is one of the first virtual workshops that we did with Servindi, excuse me. And then below were the last workshops we gave in Shintuya. It's Polarango. It's about a day away from us, and by boat. It takes about a day to get there by boat. And some of the communities, these are the last ones that received the training and received the laptops that Coarima gave to the communities. The next one, please. And also here we see, I want to highlight, this is the next to the last slide. Coarima was working with 4 radio stations with broadcasters, and they were training them so that the communities could listen through trainings through radio, but we no longer work with them. Rather, Coarima has its own radio stations online where the broadcasters and producers come from the very indigenous communities. They are the indigenous youth. They are the broadcasters. They are the ones that are in charge of being broadcasting on this such an important radio. But still, we need to have the process of training our community communicators and our broadcasters. We are still not quite well prepared for them. So this is to train them. So this is one of the challenges that we have. And I'm going to explain to you some of what is still missing, because this requires that the project is already finished. So then how are we going to sustain these different trainings that we still need, for example, for the indigenous broadcasters, the indigenous communicators? How can we continue to train them? As you can see, these are images that are very important. All these images that we have downloaded, it's not to decorate or just to have a good time. No, this is image you see here is it's Wayore Keri, and it's called the dreamer in our language, is what Wayore Keri means. And all of this means, it really highlights the digital revolution. You see that the internet is connected in the little huts in the communities. We're trying to communicate with their different organizations, and they're having virtual classes around the lakes and the rivers with the animals outside in the fresh air. It's great. And so we have launched this about 3 days ago, this magazine. This is an annual magazine, and you can see all the work that we have done of Coarima, all the work that we've done during the last 3 years, not just the 3 years, but this 5-year project that is included in the magazine. Next slide, please. On this slide, these are some of the challenges that we are facing, and there is no longer a budget to continue with this sustainability of training the communicators, the indigenous broadcasters, producers. Also, we need to have satellite internet sustainability. How we are going to be able to sustain this internet, this satellite internet? How are we going to have sustainability so that they don't cut off the signal in the community, so they can continue to have internet connection? Some of the communities also want to improve the quality of the internet. And why is that? Well, because the communities are not on equal footing. Not every community has the same amount of families. For example, in Diamante, Port Luz, Diamante, Chipitayes, these are communities that have about 300 to 500 families where internet satellite won't be enough for the entire community. Rather, we have to improve the quality. We have to have greater internet capacity where we have installed these internet satellites. And we also have to implement into the communities where there is no budget and where we're looking to organize as looking for organizations that want to organize with us and support our processes of Quaraime. So that is basically what I wanted to add. And there on the side there, you can see the names of all the communities. Those communities that are in black, written in black, those are the communities where we have been advancing, where they have internet, where they have been trained, where they have implemented the internet satellite. And on the red side, these are more than 7 communities, if I'm not mistaken. And La Shireriche, Kayakome, Saragaimenike, Yominibato, these communities are located within a reserve area, which is the Manu National Park. They are communities that are very remote, where internet still has not been installed. They are the Machinenga peoples, and they need internet. It's very fundamental that they receive it in those communities. In Quixirewire, Diamante, Puerto Luz, Palotoa, Teparo, they are also communities that still do not have internet. It's not because we don't want to, it's just that we didn't have enough budget in order to implement satellite in these indigenous communities. It was, as I say again, this is a budget that was destined for certain, earmarked for certain communities, and other communities, because we didn't have the budget, we weren't able to install the internet satellite there. And we're hoping that we will be able to continue to do this in a strategic way, how we can comply with our objective as an organization that all the communities will have these benefits. The 17 communities will enjoy the satellite internet benefits. And the last one, please. Well, thank you very much. This is all for now. I think I've already gone over my time, but it really is important. I say again that it's really important to visualize the actions of indigenous communities with the support of our allies, with the support of the consortium, and also with the organizations that are on an international level and the non-indigenous organizations that are really supporting and working to protect our rights. And Dakichi means thank you in my community. So this fruit that you see here at the end on this last slide, it is from one of our indigenous communities, and we eat it a lot. It helps to fight COVID. It helps to fight off COVID. It is our medicine. It's a medicinal fruit that we eat, and we are protected spiritually. It's called mamey in Madre de Dios. It looks like it's rotten, but it's not at all. If it becomes more rotten, then it gives a greater amount of protection. So maybe someone would like to share more about this, or maybe with this is the end of the event. Dakichi, Alejandro. Well, we have a question now. We're going to go on to the questions that have come up. We have one for Guadalupe and the other one for Alejandro. Maybe the rest of you can answer. Maybe Jeanette and Stefan, maybe you can give some closing remarks in order to finish off our event. But today, first, Adrian says, thank you very much for the work that you have done is incredible, and I congratulate all of you. we need to have more development to, or access to internet. How is it that we can protect the users from maybe problems that could come from through the internet users? We're working on with organizations and cyber, but with dangers and problems with cybernet. Is there any way to protect the users? Well, from Servindi, we are not using this because with this type of suggestions, we will continue to improve the protection on cybernet security and also of how to store information. And also, Alejandro, maybe you could answer that question. But also, I have the question for Guadalupe. It says, I would like to know a little more about your experience learning with Servindi. Was there a subject that you liked the most? Or did you have like any difficulty or complication with another subject? That's what they're asking. Maybe Alejandro, you could answer first, please. And then maybe Alejandro, I would ask you, do you know, we know that in Peru, virtual classes have started and the state is giving these classes. Maybe you can give us some information and how the internet and the community is helping so that the children that live in these communities can attend these virtual classes that are provided for by the state. Yes, Roger, thank you very much for asking me that question. Well, since the internet satellite was installed in the communities, it's important to have security because there's important documents. So, and anything could happen. So others are allies, like the Park Society or the Park Partnership, that we should have take these into account when we talk about security so that these can be prepared and protected in the indigenous communities. This is another suggestion that we are going to consider about how to install and use strategies so that our communities can be, their internet communities can be protected. And also the indigenous communities, the small communities and the big communities that we've mentioned that have a lot of families. Among the smaller communities, they are organizing themselves with the computers that have been delivered to their communities. So it's prohibited to be used in the big halls, but rather the professors are going to the homes, like for grade school, one by one, depending on the agenda that they have for each section or for each grade level. So obviously, they have their biosecurity in those communities, and the instructors have to go home by home to give the work so that they can be given the next day, turned in the next day. And when we talk about secondary schools, some communities, as I have said, have stopped, have just been the youth in the communities are kind of stuck. They are participating in virtual classes through the use of the internet, but it's not at 100% participation that they are able to attend. As I said, in the big communities that have a lot of families, we need internet that has a greater expansion so that many students can attend, because internet access that they have, it has 8 to 10 cell phones that could access the internet. If you have more, then the connectivity gets slower. And in other communities that do not have internet, they're doing everything they possibly can where they go where there is signal, and they're trying to communicate with the instructors, the advisors, and do the work that is corresponding. But it's difficult. But the Manu National Park, there are 4 communities that I mentioned, and that's a very delicate region at this time, where they're doing as much as they can to do the work that they can so that they don't lose an entire school year. So they're still on standby on how they will carry out their classes in those communities.
Muchas gracias, Alejandro. Ahora le
Thank you very much, Alejandro.
paso a Guadalupe.
Guadalupe.
Buenas.
Ahí.
Hi,
Guadalupe, te escuchamos.
we hear you. Go ahead.
Sí, ¿cuál era la pregunta? Es que la señal está muy...
What was the question? The signal was not very good.
La consulta era si es que hubo un módulo, hubo un tema
The
que
question is if there is a module
otras que te
or a topic
pareció difícil, ¿no?
that you either like very much or you find it very difficult to work with.
El tema que me gustó más es sobre bosques.
The topic that I like the most is forests and territories.
Fue fácil realizarlo porque
It was easy to manage it because I've also attended virtual trainings on that, and I have focused on that. What I found most difficult was climate financing from organizations such as, or well, COP20, 21, Red Plus.
Muchas gracias, Guadalupe.
Thank you very much, Guadalupe.
El Fondo Verde es un tema
Yes, the Green Climate Fund,
muy complejo.
it's complex
Hemos lanzado nosotros, lo hemos
subject, and as a
no
course,
tan a profundidad, ¿no? Seguramente
we have not gone much in depth,
vamos a ver en ocasiones en el futuro para tener esos cursos mucho más desarrollados, ¿no? Como
but we will be further developing
Estefan, no sé si
it,
tus
as well as
palabras
other
para cerrar el
similar, more intricate
Janet.
programs. Stefan, any final words?
No, I just want to kind of once again say that I mean I'm very impressed with this everything what has been achieved in Peru and with this virtual platform, and I really hope that this event today, as we have interpretation in English, will reach out beyond the borders of Latin America and to the rest of the world, so that indigenous peoples from other regions can find inspiration in this, and also at the UNFCCC, where this initiatives like this are key, you know, in terms of what we want to achieve. I hear what Guadalupe is saying, that some of these very technical topics are difficult to understand and follow, but just to take the example with the Green Climate Fund, there's so few indigenous representatives engaged in the Green Climate Fund. Nevertheless, there are the Green Climate Fund projects have such a huge impact on indigenous peoples around the world, And it's so important that we breach this gap, you know, and ensure engagement and active advocacy in this. And so once again, I want to congratulate everybody here today, you know, on Aprendo con Servindi and what has been achieved. And I hope that we can continue building this in the future to get an even bigger reach and build it further. So thank you very much, Roger, and all of the other panelists today, and thanks to our interpreters as well. Thank you.
Gracias, Stefan. Janet, no sé si tienes algunas palabras de despedida.
Thank you, Stefan. Janet, any departing comments? I'd like to thank everyone here for creating this space and for the invitation, and to a second call on this platform's new course and next course for new trainings. And so please stay tuned to the different topics that we are going to be addressing, citizenship being one, and
Gracias, Janet, y nuevamente agradezco también a cada uno la presencia, Stefan.
sorry, thank you. Thank you to everyone, Jean, Alejandro, Stefan, Guadalupe, Janet. I'm very satisfied with everything. And so like Janet just mentioned, I'd like to ask you to please connect with us and be abreast of the new trainings that are to come and the work we're going to plan on doing with environmentalists, the youth, not just IPs, but also those who are supporting us or working with us. We have a platform, we have a course, and I'm sure in the future we'll develop the other thematic areas, as Janet mentioned, one being citizenship and policy. As you know, in Peru, we're in a process right now in which that would be very helpful. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will be seeing you at another event. Thank you very much.